Welcome to the Podcaster's Guide to a Visible Voice. Reveal and define your voice to speak your truth through the power of podcasting. And I'm your host, Mary Chan.
So let's go.
Hello, welcome to the show. I'm so glad you decided to join me today, and thank you. Today, we're going to give you the lay of the land, a little bit of my background, and why you and I will be here together for this show. So, my main question to you is, how do you sell your products or services, your message, essentially yourself, and especially as a woman? Whether you are marketing, selling, or speaking through video platforms, social media, in person, or wherever, making an emotional connection with your audience is done through the power of your voice. I mean, you can look things up in a thesaurus all you want, but the actual words you use will not convey the same meanings as when you say them out loud. My best example is saying, I love you. I love you. I love you. I love you. Or, I love you. Right? 3 little words that have so much meaning depending on how you say it. So, how do you deliver the right tone or message and convey what you were truly wanting to say? The best way to do that, is with a podcast. Since you're listening to this, you already know the power of this medium, whether you are conscious of it or not. Podcasting is intimate, like no other form of media. You and I are sharing something like a secret message through your earbuds or speakers. There are no other distractions like there would be in video. You have the whole visual aspect, right? It's just my voice and you. So think about it in terms of your own podcast or a future podcast if you are still in the planning stages and getting your ideas together. That's totally cool too. So on your show, you as the host get to become the new best friend of all your listeners. This I know all too well from my background in radio. So who am I, you ask? If you really want to throw back all the way to when I was in grade 6, this is where my love for audio started from. I made my first mixtape. So we're talking early 90s, cassette tapes. How old are you in grade 6? 11 and 12, around there? It was elementary school, and there were only 2 grade 6 classes. And in my school at the time, they were housed together on one floor. So we got to know everyone fairly well, and we banded together with the other class to do lots of work and go on field trips. It's a pretty special setting, now that I really look back on it. Anyway, it wasn't even my grade 6 teacher that was leaving at the end of the year, but she made enough of an impact on me that I created my first mixtape for her. Now, this wasn't just any old mixtape of songs. I wanted to share why I also picked them. So I created a sort of mini radio show on tape for her. I blended the songs with my messages and me saying goodbye, goodbye, goodbye. So then fast forward to the late 90s when in high school for career prep. Did you have that course when you were in high school? We did one of those career type questionnaire things. And it revealed that I should either be A, movie producer, or B, work in radio. And I was always listening to the radio at that time. I would sneak into my classroom and have my earbuds through the sleeve of my shirt. And then I have really long hair, so I just kind of put my hand up to my ear. And I don't think the teacher ever really knew that I was listening to the radio in their class. I got away with it a lot. And so after that career test we did, and I saw radio on it, it blew my mind. It never occurred to me that I could be on the radio. It launched me into this whole job shadowing thing, finding out that there was this 2-year radio program that was really hard to get into, but I got in and I went through that. And almost 20 years into a very fun and challenging radio career, as a commercial producer and a voiceover artist, and I did dabble on air for a bit there too. I felt like I was creating mini movies in 30-second time slots when I worked on radio, and so I just didn't want it to end. But it did. You know, that's where the story goes these days. As most large companies go through a restructuring and, well, they continue to pinch their pennies. And I knew that things were shifting and downsizing was a term I heard all too often. A bunch of my friends would eventually lose their jobs at the radio station, and it still comes, not as a surprise, but more of like a shock when you get that phone call from your boss that my department has been eliminated due to cost-cutting measures, that I had finally lost my job. And it really felt like the end of my career because I didn't want to move to another city for a radio gig. They are very, very few and far between for what I did. And I didn't want to uproot my little family from the city I loved and lived in for 15 years at that time. And you know what? What hurt even more was that I was actually still recovering from a very bad concussion. They call it a mild traumatic brain injury. And I say this story now, not as a shock factor, but it's part of my life. It's just how I tell my story, and it's part of the path that got me where I am now. So it's part of my story, and I'm not looking for a pity party here, but as a fact, I was hit by a car on my bicycle only 1 year earlier from that career-ending phone call. So physically and mentally, I was not ready to go back to work either, so I was really torn about my options. So the idea of starting my own business came to me when I was slowly walking home after another medical appointment of mine, and I was listening to, yeah, you guessed it, a podcast. And you know what? It wasn't a very good one. Well, quality-wise, I could hear every little edit, and the background noise, it was quiet, but it was still there and it was distracting. And the volume on my phone, I turned it up way up to max. Yeah, it was still too quiet for me to hear when I was outside going on my walks. The content was good, but I was straining to listen, so I stopped. Then it hit me. If I am struggling to listen, others must be too. And I have this audio skill set from my previous career that I could put to good use by helping people create better sounding podcasts. So now, having all the time in the world without a job, I dove deep into learning about the podcasting industry and how it could be that springboard from radio. And I know those two industries are similar, but they are very, very different. And so I wanted to create my own show and use that as my new return to work program, kind of like a self-imposed one. And if you're curious, my first podcast is about being a homestay family to international students who study abroad. It's called The Homestay Kitchen, and I learned so much from producing that show. Even though, yes, most of my radio knowledge did transfer over easily, I used that existing skill set that I had from radio to make most of it happen. But today, in our weird time of 2020, since travel has stopped, students have not been arriving. And so my co-host and I put that podcast on hiatus while our families dealt with having all of our kids at home with us all the time. My kiddo's 4 at the time. And so it was a lot of work and priorities, right? And on the topic of the pandemic, that was the time it really got me thinking about my past and the journey to where I am today. When I was on radio, I loved collaborating with people, creating amazing audio and coaching voices to get the best read possible. At times, I would coach clients that would come into the radio station that had never, ever been behind the microphone before. I'd get them to relax, be themselves, and share their personality all through reading a script. I loved it, and I really do still miss that part. But then, realizing since I already had so many transferable skills that I knew like the back of my hand, there's content creation, audio recording, audio editing, project management, storytelling, voiceover, scripting, the list just goes on, that mirrored podcasting quite a bit. It was a natural fit. So I started my business, Organized Sound Productions, to create dynamic audio stories through podcasting. with one client at a time. I've built up my own return to work schedule, as I was saying, because that concussion was a doozy. I have to now do the work of podcasting and go to my medical appointments at the same time. And since starting the business as just an audio editor, I've now added launching podcasts and strategy sessions to my list of services, and it has definitely been a huge learning curve starting my own business. But I truly believe it took getting downsized and, getting hit by a car to get me to where I am today, empowering you to have the self-confidence to use your voice in a way that my previous career could never do. So this is my second podcast, and if you are already a podcaster in the throes of creating a podcast, or even just pondering about creating your first show, my goal is to empower you to make an impact with your vision, message, and your stories by using the power of your natural voice. The world needs diverse voices, and I'm so glad you are a part of this audio adventure with me. This is only the beginning of our podcasting journey together on this show, The Podcaster's Guide to a Visible Voice. So thank you for listening today. Thank you so much for listening to The Podcaster's Guide to a Visible Voice. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love it if you'd share it with a podcasting friend. And to reveal more voicing and podcasting tips, click on over to visiblevoicepodcast.com. Until next time.
Let's go.